In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold.
Whoever knew the penniless joy of those New Orleans neighborhoods before the catastrophe, their defiance towards the state and the widespread practice of making do with what was available, wouldn't be at all surprised by what became possible there. On the other hand, anyone trapped in the anemic and atomized everyday routine of our residential deserts might doubt that such determination could be found anywhere anymore. Reconnecting with such gestures buried under years of normalized life is the only practicable means of not sinking down with the world, while we dream of an age that is equal to our passions.
The Abracast, occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
So we're trying to dodge the spotlights, dragging our sorry asses under the barbed wire, concertina wire fences, trying not to be picked up by the drones equipped with thermometers, the laser ones, you know what I'm talking about. Here, recording in the heart of Quarantine Zone 3 in the People's Republic of Pennsylvania. It's me, John Towers. And this is the Abracast. We're recording here. The neighborhood's burning. Smell of tear gas and spray paint in the air. The smell of rubber bullets whizzing by. So I thought we'd just clock in this evening, hit the big red button, and finish out this sinister little blue book, The Coming Insurrection, that we've been talking about for a few weeks here. So I hope that you guys, it's weird, like, reading this and just, like, looking around and being like, oh, boy, it's not The Coming Insurrection anymore. So we're gonna finish it out tonight. There's one circle left, and then after that, there's like a bunch of little lessons. I don't know how many of them we'll get to. We'll certainly finish the circle, and then we'll just kind of pick through the bones of it, what's left, and fill up our time together here this evening. Which reminds me to thank you for tuning in, and why don't you drop me a line and let me know what you think of all this coming insurrection business. And with that, also would like to, I got a man down. I got a dead soldier. I was on the road last weekend, and I busted my fucking vessel of the art. It's if you recall, it's the second one I've destroyed in the 4 years now that we've been doing the show. I left it in a hotel room, broken, half filled with melted ice, like a sex crime victim. But I have other mason jars, and I have some vessels of the art that are getting ready to go out in the fulfillment section of the studio. And then I have some blanks here that are going to be vessels of the art. I just haven't gotten around to making the official number 3 yet. So I just have the trick with the vessels of the art that you get for being a Patreon or Subscribe Star supporter is that it's smooth sided because these special waterproof stickers go on them. So I have a bullshit Atlas mason jar here, probably like from the fucking 1890s. So this is the substitute teacher for until I can get my shit together. Literally, it would take me like 3 or 4 minutes to fucking do it. Anyhow, if you're playing along at home, now is the time to do it. Raise your glasses to the air when it's filled with whatever your weapon of mass distraction is, and thank my Patreon and subscribe star people. Thank you guys. Ever growing. I'm trying to figure out. Anyhow, whatever. So, so here's to you guys. Thank you very much. Without your help, none of this would be possible. All right, I gotta get to it. It sucks. Like in the summer, I gotta have the AC off to record. So it's like I always feel like I'm under the gun, because I don't want to get fucking sweaty and bullshit either, right? Okay, so this is the 7th circle, and it is called "We Are Building a Civilized Space Here." It reminds me of Atlas Shrugged. Actually, it reminds me of the real fucking world. Whenever these legislations are passed, it's like you could just take whatever it's named, it actually is going to do the polar opposite of it, right? So the title of this circle is "We Are Building a Civilized Space Here." On the first global slaughter, which was from 1914 to 1918, did away with a large portion of the urban and the rural proletariat, was waged in the name of freedom and democracy and civilization. And for the past 5 years, the so-called, quote, war on terror, unquote, with its special operations and targeted assassinations, has been pursued in the name of the same values. Yet the resemblance stops there. At the level of appearance, the value of civilization is no longer so obvious that it can be brought to the natives as a package. Freedom is no longer a name scrawled on walls, for today it is always followed by as if by its shadow with the word, quote, security. It is well known that the democracy can be dissolved in pure and simple emergency edicts. For example, the official reconstruction or reinstitution of torture in the United States, or in the torture in the United States, or in France's Bourbon II law, which is a law introduced in France in 2004 that targets organized crime and delinquency and allows for sentencing without trial. Well, that is bullshit. In a single century, freedom, democracy, and civilization have been reverted to the state of hypotheses. The leader's work from now on consists in shaping the material and moral as well as symbolic and social conditions in which these hypotheses can be more or less validated, in configuring spaces where they can seem to function. All means to these ends are acceptable, even the least democratic, the least civilized, and the more repressive. It is or was a century in which democracy regularly presided over the birth of fascist regimes. Civilizations constantly rhymed to the tune of Wagner or Iron Maiden with extermination, in which one day in 1929, freedom showed its two faces: a banker throwing himself from a window and a family of workers dying of hunger. Since then, let's say since 1945, it's taken for granted, and it's manipulating the masses, secret service operations, the restriction of public liberties, and the complete sovereignty of a wide array of police forces were appropriate ways to ensure democracy, freedom, and civilization. At the final stage of this evolution, we see the first socialist mayor of Paris putting the finishing touches on urban Pacification with a new police protocol for poor neighborhoods, announced with the following carefully chosen words, quote, "We are building a civilized space here," unquote. There's nothing more to say. Everything has to be destroyed. Though it seems general in nature, the question of civilization is not at all a philosophical one. A civilization is not an abstraction hovering over life. It is what rules, takes possession of, colonizes the most banal, personal, daily existence. That's what holds us together, that which is most intimate and most general. In France, civilization is inseparable from the state. The older and more powerful state, the less it is a superstructure or an exoskeleton of a society, and more it constitutes the subjectivities of its people. The French state is the very texture of French subjectivities. The form assumed by the century-old castration of its subjects. Thus it should come to no surprise that in their deliriums, psychiatric patients are always confusing themselves with political figures. That we agree that our leaders are at the root of all of our ills, that we like to grumble so much about them, that this grumbling is the consecration that crowns them as our masters. Here, politics is not considered something outside of us, but part of ourselves. The lives we invest in these figures is the same life that is taken away from us. If there is a French exception, this is why everything, even the global influence of French literature, is a result of this amputation. In France, literature is the prescribed space for the amusement of the castrated. It is the formal freedom conceded to those who do not accommodate themselves to the nothingness of their real freedom. I'm sorry, this stuff is just so sinister. That's what accounts for all the obscene winks exchanged for centuries now between the statesmen and men of letters in this country, as each gladly dons the other costume. That's why these intellectuals here tend to talk so loudly when they're so fucking meek. I added the F word. I just felt to throw a spin on that and why they always fail at the decisive moment. The only moment that would have given meaning to their existence, but that also wouldn't have had them banished from their professions. There exists a credible thesis that modern literature was born with Baudelaire, Heine, and Flaubert as a repercussion of the state massacre of June of 1848. It is the blood of the Parisian insurgents against the silence surrounding the slaughter. The modern literary forms were born: spleen, ambivalence, fetishism of form, and the morbid detachment. The neurotic affection of the French pledge to their republic, the name of which every smudge of ink assumes an air of dignity, and any pathetic hack is honored, underwrites the perpetual repression of its originary sacrifices. Sorry for the hiccup there. It was a brain hiccup. The June days of 1848, 1,500 dead in combat, thousands of summary executions of prisoners in the assembly, welcoming the surrender of the last barricade with the cries of "Long live the Republic." We know what this is from, right? Remember? The Blood Week of 1871. Our birthmarks no surgery can hide. 1945, Korolev wrote, "The official political idea of France and of the French is today still of the nation state, of the one and indivisible republic. On the other hand, in the depths of the soul, the country understands the inadequacy of this ideal, of the political anachronism of the strictly national ideal. The feeling has admittedly not yet reached the level of clear and distinct idea. The country cannot and will not yet express it openly. Moreover, for the very reason of the unparalleled brilliance of its national past, it is especially difficult for France to recognize clearly and to accept frankly the fact of the end of the national period of history, and to understand all of its consequences. It is hard for a country which created out of nothing the ideological framework of nationalism and exported it to the whole world to recognize that all that remains is now a document to be filed in the historical archives. The question of the nation state and its mourning is at the heart of what, for the past half a century, can only be called the French malaise. We politely give the name of alternation to this twitchy indecision, this pendulum-like oscillation from left to right, then right to left, like a manic phase after a depressive one. That is then followed by another, or by a completely rhetorical critique of individualism, easily coexists with the most ferocious cynicism, or the greatest generosity with the aversion to crowds. Since 1945, this malaise, which seems to have dissipated only during the insurrectionary fervor of May in 1968, continually worsened. The era of states, nations, and republics is coming to an end. And the country that sacrificed all of its vitality to the forms remains stunned by the fact the terrible, or the trouble caused by Jospin's simple sentence, "The state can't do everything," allows us to imagine the reaction when it becomes clear that the state can no longer do anything at all. The feeling that we've been tricked is like a wound that is becoming increasingly infected. It is the source of the latent rage that just about anything will set off these days. And the fact that the country, the obituary of the age of nations, has yet to be written in the key, the French anachronism, and to the revolutionary possibilities France still has in store. Whatever the outcome may be, the role of the next presidential elections will be to signal the end of the French illusion and to burst the historical bubble in which we are living, and which makes possible events like the anti-CPE movement that was puzzled over by other countries as if it were some bad dream. The escape from the 1970s. That's why deep down no one wants these elections. France is indeed the Red Lantern of the Western Zone. The Red Lantern is the last place finisher in the Tour de France. Today the West is the GI who dashes into Fallujah on an M1 Abrams tank listening to heavy metal at top volume. It is the tourist lost in the Mongolian plains, mocked by all, who clutches his credit card as his only lifeline. Here, I need to do a toast to this GI who's listening to heavy metal on his tank. Vulgar Display of Power by Pantera was my jam, my driving jam, my armored personnel carrier. It's the young girl who looks for happiness in clothes, guys, and moisturizing creams. It's the Swiss human rights activist who travels to the four corners of the earth to show solidarity with all the world's rebels, provided they've been defeated. It's the Spaniard who could care less about political freedom now that he's been granted sexual freedom. It's the art lover who wants us to be awestruck before the modern genius of a century of artists, from surrealism to Venice actionism, all competing to see who would best spit in the face of civilization. It's the cyberneticist who's found a realistic theory of consciousness in Buddhism, and the quantum physicist who's hoping that dabbling in Hindu metaphysics will inspire new scientific discoveries. The West is a civilization that has survived all the prophecies of its collapse, with a singular stratagem, just as the bourgeoisie had to deny itself as a class in order to permit the bourgeoisification of society as a whole, from the worker to the baron, just as the capital had to sacrifice itself as a wage relation in order to impose itself in a social relation, becoming a cultural capital and health capital in addition to a finance capital. Just as Christianity had to sacrifice itself as a religion in order to survive as an effective structure, as a vague injunction to humanity, compassion, and a weakness, so the West has sacrificed itself as a particular civilization in order to impose itself as a universal culture. The operation can be summarized like this. An entity in its death throes sacrifices itself as a content in order to survive as a form. The fragmented individual survives as a form thanks to the spiritual technologies of counseling. Patriarchy survives by attributing to women all the worst attributes of men: willfulness, self-control, insensitivity. A disintegrated society survives by propagating an epidemic of sociability and entertainment. So it goes with all the great outmoded fictions of the West maintaining themselves through artificial and artifices that contradict these fictions point by point. There is no clash of civilization. There is a clinically dead civilization kept alive by all sorts of bullshit life support machines that spread a peculiar plague into the planet. A plague into the planet's atmosphere. At this point, it can no longer believe in a single one of its own values, and any affirmation of them is considered an impudent act of provocation that should and must be taken apart, deconstructed, and returned to a state of doubt. Today, Western imperialism is the imperialism of relativism of all the it all depended on your point of view. Quote, it all depends on your point of view, unquote. It's the eye rolling or the wounded indignation. Anyone who's stupid, primitive, presumptuous enough to still believe in something, to affirm anything at all. You can see the dogmatism of constant questioning, give its complicit wink of the eye anywhere in the universities and among the literary intelligentsias. No critique is too radical along postmodernist thinkers as long as it maintains this total absence of certitude. A century ago, scandal was identified with any particular unruly or raucous negation, while today it's found in any affirmation that fails to tremble. No social order can base itself for long on the principle that nothing is true, yet it must be made secure. Applying the concept of security to everything these days is the expression of a project to securely fashion onto places, behaviors, and even people themselves, the ideal order to which they are no longer ready to submit, saying, quote, "Nothing is true," unquote. Say nothing about the world, but everything about Western concept of truth. For the West, truth is not an attribute of beings or things, but of the representation. A representation that conforms to experience is held to be true. Science is, in the last analysis, this empire of universal verification, since all human behavior, from the most ordinary to the most learned, is based on a foundation of unevenly formulated facts. And since all practices start from a point where things and their representations can no longer be distinguished, wow, a measure of truth that the Western concept excludes enters into every life. Talk in the West about real people, but only in order to mock these simpletons. This is why Westerners have always been thought of as liars and hypocrites by the people they've colonized. This is why they've envied for what they have, for their technological development, but never for what they are, for which they are rightly held in contempt. Sade, Nietzsche, or Tuad wouldn't be taught in schools of this kinds of truth mentioned above. It was not discredited in advance, containing all affirmations and deactivating all certainties as they irresistibly come to light. Such is the long labor of the Western intellect. The police and the philosophy are too convergent, it formally distinct means to this end. Of course, this imperialism of the relative finds a suitable enemy in every empty dogmatism, in whatever form of Marxist-Leninism, Salfinism, or neo-Nazism. Anyone who, like Westerners, mistake provocation for affirmation. At this juncture, any strictly social contestation that refuse to see that we are facing is not the crisis of a society, but the extinction of a civilization, becomes an accomplice in its perpetuation. It's even become a contemporary strategy to critique the society in vain, a hope of saving the civilization. So, we have a corpse on our back. Nietzsche. But we won't be able to shake it off just like that. Nothing is to be expected from the end of civilization, from its clinical death. Such a thing can only be of interest to historians. It's a fact. And it must be translated into a decision. Facts can be conjured away, but decision is political. To decide for the death of civilization, then, and to work out how it will happen, only a decision will rid us of this corpse.
Learn more at abracast.com. Get bonus content by signing up for the mailing list. Get all that, plus many exclusive episodes by supporting the show at patreon.com or subscribestar.com.
Get going! We can no longer even see how an insurrection might begin. 60 years of pacification and containment, historical upheavals, 60 years of democratic anesthesia, and the management of events have dulled our perceptions of the real. our senses of the war in progress, and we need to start by recovering this perception. It is useless to get indignant about openly unconstitutional laws such as Per-Ben 2. It's futile to legally protest the complete implosion of the legal framework. We have to get organized. It's useless to get involved in this or that citizens group. It is this or that dead end of the far left or in the latest community effort. Every organization that claims to contest the present order mimics the form, mores and language of miniature states. Thus far, every impulse to do politics differently has only contributed to the indefinite spread of the state's tentacles. It's useless to react to the news of the day. Instead, we should understand each report as a maneuver in a hostile field of strategies to be decoded, operations designed to provoke a specific reaction. It's these operations themselves that should be taken as the real information contained in these pieces of news. This motherfucker's got a point right here. I gotta... It's useless to wait for a breakthrough, for the revolution, the nuclear apocalypse, or the social movement. To go on waiting is madness. The catastrophe is not coming. It is here, and we are already situated within the collapse of a civilization. It is with this reality that we must choose sides. To no longer wait is, in one way or another, to enter into a logic of insurrection. It is once again to hear the slight but always present trembling of terror in the voices of our leaders, because governing has never been anything other than postponing by 1,000 subterfuges the moment when the crowd will string you up, and every act of government is nothing but a way of not losing control of the population. We are setting out from a point of extreme isolation, of extreme weakness. An insurrectional process must be built from the ground up. Nothing appears less likely than an insurrection, but nothing is more necessary. Find each other. Attach yourself to what you feel to be true and begin there. An encounter, a discovery, a vast wave of strikes, an earthquake. Every event produces truth by changing our way of being in the world. Conversely, any observation that leaves us indifferent doesn't affect us, doesn't commit us to anything, no longer deserves the name truth. There's truth beneath every gesture, every practice, every relationship, and every situation. We usually just avoid it, manage it, which produces the madness of so many in our era. In reality, everything involves everything else. The feeling that one is living a lie is still a truth. It is a matter of not letting it go, of starting from there. A truth isn't a view of the world, but what binds us to it in an irreducible way. A truth isn't something we hold, but something that carries us. It makes and unmakes us. It constitutes us and undoes me as an individual. It distances me from many and brings me closer to those who also experience it. An isolated being who holds fast the truth will inevitably meet others like her. In fact, every insurrectional process starts from a truth that we refuse to give up. During the 80s in Hamburg, a few inhabitants of squatted house decided that from then on they would only be evicted over their dead bodies. A neighborhood was besieged by tanks and helicopters with days of street battles, huge demonstrations, and a mayor who finally capitulated in 1940. I don't know how to pronounce this. Georges Guinaguin, the first French resistance fighter, started with nothing, with the certainty of his refusal of the Nazi occupation. And at that time, to the Communist Party, he was nothing but a madman living in the woods. Until there were 20,000 madmen living in the woods. And Limoges was liberated. Don't back away from what is political in friendship. We have been given a neutral idea of friendship, understood as a pure affection with no consequences. But all affinity is affinity within a common truth. Every encounter is an encounter with a common affirmation, and the affirmation of destruction. No bonds are innocent in an age when holding on to something and refusing to let go usually leads to unemployment, where you have to lie to work, and you have to keep on working in order to continue lying. People who swear by quantum physics, he's really caught up with quantum physics, at least in this episode, and pursue its consequences in all domains are no less bound politically than comrades fighting against a multinational agribusiness. They will all be led sooner or later to defection and to combat. The pioneers of the workers' movement were able to find each other in the workshops. Then, in a factory, they had the strike to show their numbers and unmask the scabs. And they had the wage relations pitting in the party of the capital against the party of labor, on which they could draw the lines of solidarity and of battle on a global scale. We have the whole of social space in which we find each other. We have everyday insubordination for showing our numbers and unmasking cowards. We have our hostility to this civilization for drawing lines of solidarity and of battle on a global scale. Accept nothing from organizations, beware of all existing social milieus, and above all, don't fucking become one. It is not uncommon in the course of a significant breaking of the social bond to cross paths with organizations, political, labor, humanitarian, community, association, etc. Among their members, one may even find individuals who are sincere, if a little desperate, who are enthusiastic, if a little conniving. The organizations are attractive due to their apparent consistency. They have a history, a head office, a name, resources, a leader, a strategy, and a discourse. They are nonetheless empty structures which, in spite of their grand origin, can never be filled. In all their affairs at every level, these organizations are concerned above all with their own survival as organizations and little else. Their repeated betrayals have often alienated the commitment of their own rank and file, and this is why you can, on occasion, run into worthy beings within them. But the promise of the encounter can only be realized outside the organization and unavoidably at odds with it. Far more dreadful are social milieus with their supple texture, their gossip, their informal hierarchies. Flee all milieus. Each and every milieu is oriented towards the neutralization of some truth. Literally, circles exist to smother the clarity of writing. literary circles exist to smother the clarity of writing, anarchist milieus to blunt the directness of direct action, scientific milieus to withhold the implications of their research from the majority of people today, sport milieus to contain in their gyms the various forms of life they should create. Particularly to be avoided are the cultural and activist circles. They are the old people's homes, where all revolutionary desires traditionally go to die. The task of the cultural circle is to spot nascent intensities and to explain why the sense whatever it is you're doing, while the task of activist circles is to sap your energy for doing it. Activist milieus spread their diffuse web through the French territory and are encountered on the path of every revolutionary deployment. They offer nothing but the store of their many defeats and the bitterness they have produced. Their exhaustion has made them incapable of seizing the possibilities of the present. Besides, to nurture their wretched passivity, they walk too much, and this makes them unreliable. They talk far too much, and this makes them unreliable. When it comes to the police, just as it's useless to expect anything from them, it's stupid to be disappointed by their sclerosis. It's best just to abandon the dead weight. All milieus are counter-revolutionary because they are only concerned with the preservation of their sad comfort. Wow. This really makes me think of the Squad versus Nancy Pelosi, right? That's what I think of anyway. Bernie Bros versus Biden people. All right, we're going to do one more. Form communes. Communes come into being when people find each other, get on with each other, and decide on a common path. The commune is perhaps what gets decided at the very moment when we would normally part ways. It's the joy of an encounter that survives its expected end. It's what makes us say we and makes that an event. What's strange isn't that people who are attuned to each other form communes, but then they remain separated. Why shouldn't communes proliferate everywhere? In every factory, every street, every village, every school, at long last, the reign of the base committees. Oh boy. Communes that accept being what they are, where they are, and if possible, a multiplicity of communes that will displace the institutions of society, family, displace the institutions of society. Listen, I know BLM has been doing a lot of reconstruction on the what we believe part of their website, but listen, this is basically what this is it. It will displace the institutions of society, family, school, union, sports clubs, etc. The BLM, I talked about this briefly with Trevor Loudon. We did not get into it at all. But the what we believe section of BLM says we strive for the destruction of the nuclear family. That's pretty much a dead quote. I'm like, really? That doesn't sound like African American beliefs to me. Culture, African American culture to me. Communes that aren't afraid, and I can mention BLM when we're talking about communes because of the CHOP AutoZone, right? Communes that aren't afraid beyond their specifically political activities to organize themselves for the material and the moral survival of each of their members and of all of those around them who remain adrift. Communes that would not define themselves as collectives tend to do, but what's inside and what's outside them, by the destiny of the ties at their core, not by their membership, but by their spirit that animates them. A commune forms every time a few people, freed of their individual straitjackets, decide to rely on themselves. And I mean, I hate to throw cold water on them, but the second a commune happens, they have to start begging for resources. I mean, it's literally the first order of business. All right, hey, let's get together. Let's do a commune. It's a place of free love, brother. You know, I guess in the 70s or the 60s, that's what this would be. It's a commune. We don't need the structure of the outside world. Hey, what are we going to eat? Why don't you go start picking through dumpsters and begging for food and bring it back so we can divide it up equally according to our needs? A commune, individual straitjackets. I already did that. Every wildcat strike is a commune. Every building occupied collectively and on a clear basis is a commune. The action committees of 68 were communes, as were the slave maroons in the United States, or Radio Alice of Bologna in 77. Every commune seeks to be its own base. It seeks to dissolve the question of needs. It seeks to break all economic dependency of political subjugation. It degenerates into a milieu the moment it loses contact with the truths of which it is founded. There are all kinds of communes that wait neither for the numbers nor the means to get organized, and even less for the right moment, which never arrives. So there's still, I don't know, maybe like 20 or 30 pages left, but I'm done with this thing. I'm never reading this book again. This is the second time I read it. I fucking hate it. I'm John. This is the Advercast. Hey, I want to encourage you guys to sign into the mailing list. Also, check out our Patreon and or Subscribe Star thing. The Fellow Craft episode, which is the exclusive episode, monthly exclusive episode on Patreon and Subscribe Star. This month is we're doing a big 40 series, and we did like UFOs and we did like Bigfoots, and now we're doing Atlantis. This is the fourth and final Atlantis episode, and next month we're changing gears and getting into another 40 topic. I'm not going to tell you what it is yet. Sign up to the mailing list. Check out the store section. Check out the Abercast. And I'll catch you guys in a few days.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Send an email or visit us on social media to let us know what you think about this topic. And please remember to leave a 5-star rate and review.
Hey, did you learn something? Did you laugh? Supporting me is a way for you to be a part of the Abercast and ensure its growth and sustainability. It also means I can create a normal schedule for shows and bonus shows, as well as the exclusive Fellowcraft episodes. By supporting the show, you are not only a listener, but you are a part of the show. You supporting the show gives me a way to offer fun rewards as a thank you for showing your appreciation and support for our projects. Do you have an idea for a reward that you don't see? Let me know. My supporters are my partners. I currently pay for you to listen to the Abercast. Not only do I pay the hosting bills out of my own pocket, I volunteer my time and talent to each and every episode of the Abercast. The price of books, the time and resources of reading and researching, the massive amounts of gin and tonic needed, the equipment it takes to record the shows, the time and resources it takes to create the bonus material, and the cost to maintain the internet presence. Is it worth your support? I don't know. I'm proud of the Abercast, and I feel like I'm improving all the time. In addition to creating the show that you dig and that you are excited about, I also have a full-time commitment and other obligations. So why financial support? All of the supporters help me focus my time on the quality and development of the podcast. And what if you can't afford, $1 or $3 or $10 or whatever a month? Believe me, I get that. There are many degrees of support, but if you can't support the show financially, please consider leaving a 5-star rate and review on your preferred podcast app. And don't forget that you can sign into the mailing list and still unlock a lot of bonus content. Thank you. I cannot put into words how much it means to me that you listen to the show each time I post a new episode. Your feedback, support, and love of the stories that we talk about here is what keeps me going.